All right, welcome to today's explainer. I am super excited about this one because we're going to completely deconstruct a highly successful performance marketing machine. We're looking at a world-class blueprint that details exactly how a brand scaled from absolute zero to a multi-million-dollar revenue run rate. If you love understanding the actual mechanics behind massive business growth, you are in exactly the right place.
Okay, let's dive into this. Picture this. You're launching into a highly competitive market. You've got absolutely zero existing audience lists, no mature pixel data to lean on, literally nothing, just a blank slate. How do you take that void and turn it into $1.5 million in just 12 months? It's an incredibly difficult challenge, right? But as we're going to see, it is entirely possible when you build the right architecture. And that's exactly what we're going to learn how to apply today.
The subject of our case study today is an eco-friendly e-commerce brand called Switchnails. And I want you to think of their strategy exactly like building a high-performance engine. You feed raw data and capital in, and through a series of highly optimized mechanical processes, it generates immense power out. They built and revved this engine to maximum capacity in exactly 12 months, starting back in April 2023. Think about the stark contrast between where they started and where they ended up. At System Boot, it was just a total void. Zero revenue, no ad account, no pixel data, null return on ad spend, meaning ads generated zero revenue. But fast forward to their peak output just 12 months later, $1.5 million in total yearly revenue, 16 million processed impressions, and a highly stable 3.0x blended average ROAS. Going from an unknown entity to a dominant niche player like that is exactly why this strategy demands our focused attention.
Here's the actual roadmap for today's blueprint. We're going to cover the Zero Data Challenge, building the data foundation, the acquisition engine, winning the creative hook, and finally, profit-first scaling logic.
Let's start with part one, the Zero Data Challenge, operating in the void.
The environmental constraints they were up against were absolutely massive. First off, no historical intelligence. They had no algorithmic maturity to help them target buyers. Second, they were jumping into the eco-beauty niche, which was already about 90% saturated. They were literally going up against established conglomerates. And third, they had a locked, 100% strict operational directive, profit-first scaling. They didn't have a massive initial burn budget to just casually buy market share. Every single ad dollar they deployed had to immediately yield a positive contribution margin. The sale had to be profitable right out of the gate.
Moving to step two, building the data foundation, bypassing the blockers. And the way they bypass these blockers brilliantly illustrates the need for a resilient infrastructure. In a post-iOS 14 world, if you rely on a standard browser pixel, you're just losing way too much signal. So instead, they implemented a robust Server-Side Conversion API, or CAPI. This basically routes right around the firewall, feeding clean, direct signals back into the Meta Ads algorithm. The result of that? 100% data integrity maintained for algorithmic training, which is absolutely crucial for a brand new ad account. Okay, part three. The acquisition engine, smart capital and architecture. When it came to capital deployment, they followed a very strict 70-20-10 risk allocation rule. 70% of the budget went straight to prospecting. That's aggressive net new customer acquisition. 20% was dedicated to retargeting infrastructure, capturing delayed conversions and abandoned carts. But that final 10%, that is the absolute secret weapon here, creative sandboxing. This isolated budget allowed them to test variables and find their next winning hooks without ever putting their core performance budget at risk. So, how did they actually use that 70% prospecting budget to find buyers? They used an architecture called the distillation cone. By starting out super broad with general eco and beauty interests, they gave Meta's AI-driven Advantage Plus algorithms the freedom to actually map the ecosystem. The algorithm then naturally distilled all those wide sustainability interests down into incredibly precise, high-intent purchasing cohorts at the very bottom of the funnel. To manage all of this, the agency relied on a highly dense funnel architecture diagnostic matrix. Across the top, middle, and bottom of the funnel, they were incredibly careful to align the objective, the primary platform, the specific ad format, and the core messaging to guarantee a completely seamless user journey. Let's actually distill that complex matrix down into three clear takeaways. First, the top of funnel relied heavily on TikTok and Metaspark ads featuring educational, problem-solution content to drive cold discovery. Second, the middle of the funnel nurtured that consideration using video and carousel how-to demonstrations on Meta. And finally, the bottom of the funnel aggressively captured the revenue using dynamic product ads and automated email flows that focused heavily on social proof and cart abandonment urgency. Part 4. Winning the creative hook.
the psychological pivot. Now, what's really interesting about this strategy is the psychological balance they struck. They didn't just push nice-looking products. They positioned Switch nails directly against a traditional salon visit. They highlighted the heavy, one-time high cost of going to the salon and weighed it directly against their own reusable, low-price-per-wear product. They essentially gave the consumer a highly logical financial justification to make the switch.
We didn't sell eco-friendliness first. We sold salon quality at home. That is such a brilliant, counterintuitive pivot. Even though they are a deeply eco-conscious brand in a saturated eco-beauty niche, they realized that solving a direct consumer problem, expensive salon visits, was a much more powerful acquisition hook for winning market share than just leading with sustainability. They executed this hook through a cross-platform traffic ecosystem that deliberately decoupled discovery from conversion recovery. For discovery, they leveraged native creator authority via TikTok Spark ads and whitelisting. This means the ads run directly through the creator's own handles rather than a corporate brand account, which drastically lowered their cost per acquisition. Then, all that raw traffic would hit the brand hub, where meta-dynamic product ads and automated email flows acted as this unbreakable net to recover any of those delayed conversions.
And finally, Part 5. Profit-first scaling logic, the operational tempo. To maintain their operational tempo once the machine was running, they utilized a weekly optimization flywheel. Clean data feeds into the system, which then undergoes a rigorous contribution margin analysis. That analysis directly dictates capital reallocation, which then funds fast creative sandboxing to test new user-generated content hooks. And this exact cycle repeats every single week, continuously refining the machine. And they adhered to some incredibly strict rules to make this flywheel spin. First, their whole strategy was built on speed. They had to discover winning creatives faster than their richer competitors to outpace them in efficiency. Second, that 10% creative sandboxing was used strictly as a financial risk mitigation tool. And third, scaling was never achieved by blindly injecting cash. Every single ad dollar was subjected to rigorous contribution margin analysis. They made absolutely sure that aggressive scaling never compromised profitability.
3.0x blended average ROS. Because of that extreme financial discipline, they maintained a stable 3.0x return on ad spend. Let that sink in for a second. Achieving a 3.0x return on cold acquisition in a 90% saturated beauty market starting from absolute zero. That is an incredibly impressive output.
So, the crucial point is that this resulted in a literal hockey stick growth curve. Over just 12 months, with a total ad spend of just over $450K, they achieved a massive 380% increase in total revenue from June to December alone. They crossed the multi-million run rate threshold, locking in that $1.5 million revenue output. This data-driven, profit-first blueprint definitively works. We've covered a ton of ground today. We've unpacked the data infrastructure, the capital allocation, the creative psychology, and the financial flywheel of a highly successful performance marketing campaign. It's a lot to process, but it's incredibly powerful. So I'll leave you with this to think about. If you were handed a brand tomorrow with absolutely zero historical data, which gear of this growth engine would you build first? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep building.